Hello.
Hi.
So I think now we've got some questions here in the chat, and I think Kayo's going to go first, and I think we're going to have some time for some more, but we've got a few already ready for you, Anderson. You ready to go, Kayo?
Sure. So, what's your opinion on Brazil politics and economy? How is Brazil seen abroad?
It's a very interesting question, of course, but the reality in Brazil and the politics in Brazil, it is a democratic system. And the nature of democracy is you have difference of opinion and you have diversity in opinion. And the way that democracy is formed, especially in Brazil, is through a coalition party. That means you'll have to form coalitions, despite the fact that the different parties have different agendas, but drive towards one Brazil, and hopefully that one Brazil is for all its citizens. So, because of its political structure, it is always very interesting. Some say it's challenging, some say it's confusing, but it is. Everyone can agree that the Brazilian politics is always interesting. So, in our perspective, I think businesses have to be able to work together with the government. And our policy in our company has always been very simple. We call it 5 C's. I know it sounds very idealistic, but we try to really stick to our core values and our vision. When we try to do any business in any country, it doesn't matter whether it's Brazil or other countries, first it has to bring benefit to the community, the local community. When you bring benefit to the local community, you of course have to align yourself with the policies of the country. So that's the second C. The third C, we always say whatever we do has to be good for the climate and the environment. Now, in the time of, especially in this current global movement, if you're in an industry that is damaging the environment or against the climate movement, I think it'll be very difficult for you to continue to succeed in the business. The fourth C is customer in the end, right? Because we always have a saying in our company, it's not me who pays the salary of our colleagues or employees, it's actually the customers, because the customers are the ones who pay the company and that generates their revenue. So if you're focused on the first 4 C's, which is again community first, country, climate, customer, eventually it'll be good for the company. So our policy has always been really focusing on about the company itself, really working collaboratively with all the governments wherever we're at, and really be able to conduct our business from generations to generations. And sometimes the challenge is in Brazilian politics, or even politics in everywhere around the world, is that governments are a little bit shorter in terms of time frame, and hence we try to adjust ourselves, still meeting all the short-term objectives, but also meeting the long-term objectives of the people around us.
That's great. I'm going to try to make a little Portuguese summary, but I really love the 5 C's, and I know I've heard you guys talk about this around the country, around the world, and so that's really interesting that you have a practice that can be transmitted in different countries. Então, eles trabalham o RGE, o Brasil, em diferentes países, sempre falando dos 5 Cs, que é a comunidade primeiro, depois o país, depois o climate, depois o cliente e, por último, a empresa, e com uma visão muito longo prazo. E que é uma coisa que o Anderson está colocando, que sempre cada país que eles estão, eles precisam adaptar as regras do país. E, normalmente, o que tem em comum é que, na política, às vezes, a visão é mais curto prazo e a empresa é mais longo prazo, mas que sempre está adaptando a isso. Então, esperamos que estão bem-vindos à nossa comunidade. Vamos achar coisa a longo prazo. Obrigada. Thank you, Anderson. So, Victor, you ready for the next question?
Yes. Agora a gente vai fazer uma pergunta para o Anderson relacionada às semelhanças que ele comentou entre a cultura brasileira e a cultura dele, e sobre a nossa língua. So Anderson, you mentioned some similarities between your culture and Brazilian one, and we want to know what you think about Portuguese. Have you ever thought about similarities or learning it?
If I was 15, I would definitely be learning Portuguese again. But I think there is a high correlation between age and ability to absorb language. That being said, I think I'm starting to pick up small little phrases. The way Portuguese is pronounced, especially the way Brazilian style Portuguese, is very similar to the way that Indonesian pronounce its vowel. So it's A, B, C. So every alphabet, it's a vowel, and similar to Portuguese as well. So I cannot make any promises. But one thing for sure, if I spend more and more time in Portuguese, the nature of my work requires me to survive in Brazil, and hence hopefully my Portuguese continues to improve. But as I say, you guys have a much brighter future than I am, because both of you are bilingual, both in Portuguese, fluent, and also getting more and more fluent in English. So you guys are already ahead in terms of advantage and opportunity, and will definitely do better than me. So.
Então, o Anderson está falando que se ele tem interesse em aprender português, se ele tem aprendido o português, e ele falou que ele gostaria de ter 15 anos como eles e ser bilíngues, mas que ele está aprendendo algumas coisas e que tem uns vocais são parecidos com Indonésia. Isso ajuda um pouco, mas ele sabe sobreviver. E claro que a mensagem a ele é: todos vocês aprendem outra língua, trabalhem com inglês. Eu acho que é muito bom ser bilíngue, isso ajuda todo mundo. Agora, Caio, vocês têm outra pergunta aí?
Yeah, we have. So, what was the greatest accomplishment that you experienced? How has it impacted in your life?
Everyone always thinks there's one great accomplishment that you can refer back to, because who you are as a person is a series of events, actually, not one event that makes who we are, right? I think everyone knows this. But I think if I could refer back to the last 2 years, maybe the last 24 months since 2020, one of the highlight of my last 2 years is back in March 2020, which is last year. I've had the privilege to be able to host the president of Indonesia, President Joko Widodo, in our operations in Indonesia, in our factory, because we were just completing our additional new investment. But beyond that, actually, we were discussing internally in terms of management who should lead the hosting, because of course the president's coming with 4 or 5 ministers. It was a very important visit to our operations. And initially, I thought it's going to be my father, Mr. Sukanto, so I was playing a bit more of a support role. But actually, he told me that it is time for me to take the lead and to actually be the one hosting this. So I was, of course, under a lot of pressure. But I always say, when the going gets tough, I think the tough gets going. That means when you're put under pressure, you really have to perform. So in any case, I was able to host the president in our factory back last year in 2020. And I gave a speech in front of almost 20,000 employees, and of course in front of the president himself. And the chairman of the company, my father, cracked a joke. He hosted the previous president in 1975, when he was 26 years old, in the inauguration of his factory. This is 1975. He was born 1949, so he was only 26. And again, he gave the speech in front of the president and back then a few other ministers. So last year I was already 31, and he said that I was already 5 years late. So I think that was probably a very memorable moment, a very memorable experience. But also, I realized that nowadays, being young doesn't give you or doesn't stop you from doing anything. Times have changed. Maybe back in the days, a few decades ago, age does restrict you to do certain things. I think people tend to look up to older people. People tend to accept leadership from someone with 30 or 40 years of working experience. But nowadays, if you look at startup companies, young entrepreneurs at 27 years old, tech company CEOs at 35 running a multi-billion-dollar business. So I think the time for the young generation to be able to step up and shine, I think there's never been a better time. Technology flattens bureaucracy. Technology also speeds up the experience and learning curve. Both gives us an advantage to be able to lead, whether it's a small team, whether it's a small organization, whether it's a large organization, and age wouldn't be a hindrance anymore. So that was a very special and unique experience. I don't think I'll ever forget it for the rest of my life. And I hope that I can continue on to do more interesting things in the coming years ahead. Because I always say when you reach a certain age and you're able to do interesting things, I always look back and say, is this the peak or can I do more? And that's always a fear, but also a challenge for all of us, right? I mean, once you reach a certain standard, how can you push yourself to do even better? And I think having that self-awareness is already the first step, meaning knowing that we shouldn't stop it there and we should continue to improve further and further. So
it's great to know that you can still be pushed, right? Those are huge things. So I'm not going to translate all of that, but just say a little bit of the top moments. But so Anderson está falando que dos maiores desafios que ele teve recentemente foi falar com o presidente da Indonésia, que veio para a fábrica. Ele não esperava que ele ia falar. E o pai falou, agora é sua vez, então você vai falar. E ele falou em frente de 20 mil colaboradores, mais a presidente do país. E foi um super desafio, ele ficou muito grato, mas o pai falou que ele estava um pouco atrasado, porque o pai tinha feito algo parecido um pouco mais jovem. Mas ele falando como que o jovem, de fato, hoje é mais bem visto. Antigamente tinha que ter 30 anos de experiência para ser ouvido e alguém prestar atenção, e agora com tecnologia baixou um pouco as dificuldades dos jovens se aparecerem e fazer coisas, mas que ele está sempre pensando, será que esse foi o meu pico ou tem mais? Mas me parece que ele está sempre se desafiando, então com certeza vai ter mais. Vamos lá, Victor, tem mais alguma pergunta? Temos tempo?
Yes, we have
one more?
A couple more.
Ok.
A gente tem tempo para mais umas 2 perguntas, pessoal. E agora eu vou fazer uma pergunta para o Anderson relacionada aos desafios de lidar com multinacionais e ser o diretor de empresas aos 30 anos, porque para quem não sabe, o Anderson tem 32 anos. E I'm gonna make in English for him and then Sarah will translate to you. Então eu vou falar em inglês e depois a Sarah traduz para vocês. Anderson, what are the challenges of leading a group with multinationals so young at 30? And how do you feel about difficult times when you have to make decisions that can impact lives of so many people?
I think the biggest challenge for me is that there's only you only have limited time, and that's in the end that's the reality of the world we live in, right? I mean, we can have unlimited support and we can have other resources or additional resources to help you, but in the end, one thing that we cannot have an addition of is time. So hence, I think as I continue to learn how to do even a better job for what I'm doing, is better time management. Really being able to know how to manage your time, including, for example, right now it is 7 a.m. in the morning here I'm actually now traveling in China. So really managing time differences, really engaging the various countries at different times, it's probably the biggest challenge for me. But it is also very gratifying because you're really able to have a very expansive reach. And one thing I've learned is that you really try to set schedules and certain routines to be able to lock in certain time to engage respective leaders in the various countries, especially with the time difference. I think scheduling in advance and building a routine is very important to be able to increase your ability to manage a larger organization. The second thing, I think the biggest interesting and the biggest challenge as well, especially at a relatively young age, to be put into this place of decision, is how do you continue to balance being decisive, but still being able to have the opportunity to listen, as well as allow certain information to flow from bottoms up, right? I think this is always a constant struggle as you continue to run larger organizations, is how do you ensure that you, when you need to make tough decisions and you need to make decisions, they are able to deduce and triangulate all the information and make the best decision possible at that point in time. Yet also still continue to be able to have empathy, be able to listen to facts on the ground, being able to really bypass a lot of the structure and organizations that you've built in and really understand what's happening on the ground. So I think anyone who's able to really go down to the ground, understand what's happening, read and prepare with the data that's given, triangulate information from your various direct reports and management, and then be able to arrive at the right decision. These are quite complex management methods, but this is what that has brought us to where we're at, and this is how I think it's very important to be successful as a leader of a larger organization. So coming back to what's relevant to everyone in this audience, I think the most importantly, manage your time properly, because time is precious. Build up a routine, schedule your meetings in advance, and as you continue to lead, always remember when you're put in the position of decision or making, or put in the position of power, always still have the empathy and always still have the curiosity to listen to what's happening on the ground. Because the day a leader is out of touch with what's happening on the ground, it's a day. It's a very sad day. It's a day of his or her decline, actually. So hopefully that's a very simple way of describing a little bit of some of the things I have to do. But of course, the management techniques get more and more complicated. So I don't want to drag you guys down to confuse some of these management techniques.
Eu acho que a resposta da Anderson, thank you, Anderson, try to make something very complicated seem small tasks that are really important, and I think that's great for everybody. Então, o Anderson está falando, claro que é muito difícil estar na liderança de muitas pessoas em diferentes fusos horários, etc., mas algumas coisas são muito importantes para não esquecer. Então, primeiro é o gerenciamento do nosso tempo, porque o tempo não volta. E que é muito importante priorizar grandes reuniões, momentos que você quer priorizar isso já com o agendamento no futuro, para que você não perde isso de vista. E na parte de tomada de decisão, para lembrar como ouvir as pessoas, ter curiosidade, antes de tomar uma decisão, tentar pegar os dados, ouvir pessoas, ter empatia, e isso faz ele balancear melhor umas decisões e ser mais em contato com as pessoas, para não ficar distanciado. Eu acho que são excelentes exemplos para vocês. Mais alguns aqui? Victor, Caio, agora, você tem mais um? Anderson.
Last one.
É o que?
Então, pessoal, essa é a última pergunta. Anderson, to finalize, please talk about the challenge after this pandemic period, companies people.
I think that's a very excellent question. I think what the pandemic puts as a challenge for all companies is that the pandemic hits at the core of what makes a company. What makes it? It's not a company is not made out of factories. A company is not made of assets. A company is made of its people. And the people is a true company. The people is a true asset of the company. We're very fortunate that some of our operations and most of our operations still permits people to as essential services to be present in the office or to be present in the shop floor in the factory and to still be able to engage. But the pandemic in many of the urban offices, whether it's Singapore or New York or all the city offices, has resulted in remote working. Well, I think remote working has a lot of its benefits. Remote working also has a lot of its challenges. How can you drive the kind of culture that you want to do in a company, not being able to engage face to face with an individual? Right? How are you able to drive some of the informal interactions, which are so important to what makes a good company great? How can that be done over Zoom or video calls? It's not easy, right? So I think the biggest challenge that the pandemic posed to a lot of the companies is with limited or with less human face-to-face interaction. How can you still make a company truly a company? So that's going to be the big challenge for a lot of organizations. And I think those who can navigate this, we call it hybrid era, where there's less face-to-face interaction, will be the ones to be able to really drive good performance out of its employees and its organization. That's more of an internal thing. The external factor is the pandemic has definitely, I say, create winners and losers. Right? And people ask ourselves, is the pandemic a V-shaped recovery? Is it a U-shaped recovery? V is very quick, U-shape is very slow, or is it a Nike-shaped tick? So it's a small blip and a big increase. I think we all know it's definitely not a Nike shape. It's not a big tick up. It's come down a lot, but in some sense we call it a K-shaped recovery, where there are people and there are organizations that's able to benefit and recover quicker, and there are organizations who are recovering a little bit slower. So the biggest challenge for me in the pandemic is that how can we make sure that even as some industries recover quicker than others, that we do not forget that there are still others who has a lot of difficulties and challenges. There's still a lot of organizations, there's still a lot of individuals who are still in a very disprivileged and also in a very difficult environment. And that's very important, because sometimes as we see certain countries have recovered or certain industries have recovered, we think that the whole world has recovered. It hasn't. A portion of it has recovered and a portion of it has not. And so our goal is to make sure that everyone recovers out of this pandemic. So last but not least is, of course, individual health and safety, right? Because the pandemic is one of the things that has hit each of us individually very hard in one way or another. So really, to ensure that we have vaccines rolled out, not only in accessible cities, but everywhere around the world. The thing about vaccination is, if you look at the science behind it, it's all about inoculation rate. And when you have not reached a certain threshold percentage of inoculation, which is 60 or 70% of the population, unfortunately, the caseloads do not drop. So really, the biggest challenge is really to make sure that the vaccines are available for everyone who's willing to take the vaccine. But also not only that, to be able to reach a certain level of vaccination and inoculation so that we can really change the pandemic to become an endemic, and hopefully eventually in the next few years it'll be behind us. So there are a series of challenges from an individual perspective, from the macro global economic recovery perspective, but also from the way we're working as organizations and how various organizations work. So the pandemic has really thrown many, in baseball, they call it curveballs, right? They've really been able to throw in everything that we're taught to do as individuals. We have to adjust. And I think I stated earlier today, in the end, it's not the strongest that survives. It's not the smartest that survives. It's the one that adapts to the changing environment, that thrives and survives. So on that note, I think the pandemic is here, and we have to continue to adjust the way we work, the way we manage things, and the way we lead. But in the future, there'll be other things that come in, whether it's pandemic, whether it's other curveballs that the world will throw at us. But the most importantly for us as individuals is really be able to adapt to the changing environment as quick as possible, and really be able to move forward and make ourselves better as individuals despite the changing environment.
So many important points. Thank you, Anderson. So just try to sum up a little bit that, do it justice. It's very difficult. You're giving great answers to difficult issues. Então, o Anderson está falando um pouco sobre o que mudou na pandemia, e ele deu uma resposta bem abrangente, que eu vou tentar resumir, que tem o lado realmente dos países, tem o lado do indivíduo e tem o lado das empresas. Pelo lado das empresas, as empresas, de fato, precisou aprender, trabalhar com híbrido, ter menos interações com os seres humanos ao vivo, e como conseguir a cultura, a empresa junto nesse momento. E tem empresa que tem feito isso melhor e outros piores, mas tem mostrado que os humanos são importantes nas organizações. Então, nós temos que achar essas maneiras informais e cultura humana dentro das organizações. No lado dos países e das empresas também, que tem alguns que não tiveram benefícios e outros que tiveram desafios, e que nem todo mundo é igual. Então, eu acho que é muito importante que ele colocou, que nós temos que lembrar, se nós estamos recuperando bem, pode ser que tenha outra pessoa, outra empresa, outro país que não está recuperando igual, e que nós precisamos conseguir que todo mundo vai bem, e que nós lembramos de todo mundo que ainda pode estar sofrendo. Então, ele colocou que às vezes falamos da recuperação em V, às vezes em W, às vezes como Nike, como curva, mas pode ser K, que de fato tem gente que está ainda sofrendo e pessoas que estão indo bem. Então, nós temos que nivelar. Acho que é super, super importante de lembrar que nem todo mundo entrou na pandemia igual, nem passou e nem está igual nesse momento. E o lado do indivíduo, que de fato uma coisa que ele já tinha falado, que nem sempre é o mais inteligente ou mais forte, mas quem sabe adaptar mais rápido. Então, essa adaptação é muito importante do indivíduo e das organizações. E, por último, as vacinas, que, de fato, ter vacinas, conseguir ter pessoas acessíveis às vacinas e pessoas que querem tomar as vacinas, para que nós conseguimos essas 60%, 70% das populações para ter mais segurança. Então, tudo isso é complexo, mas eu acho que ele está mostrando que nós somos muito capazes de adaptar essa complexidade e achar esse novo padrão para todos. Mas tem sido muito rico suas respostas. It's a rich discussion, Anderson, and we're really excited to have it with you. I think we're coming to the end. Caio, do you have one last thing to say or to...
Thank Tanoto with Talk With Us. Obrigado, pessoal da live, por estar acompanhando a gente. Foi um prazer imenso estar aqui.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure, and we're really thankful that you could put us on your schedule in the future, and hope to have it on your schedule in other times so that we can go back and talk about leadership and youth and the future.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Sarah, for organizing this.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a good day. Anderson está começando o dia dele, então 7 horas da manhã lá, ou quase 8 agora. Então, ele vai realmente começar o dia conosco e nós estamos terminando com ele. Muito obrigada, Caio, Vitor. Vitor caiu um pouco, mas muito obrigada, Vitor. E todo mundo do Instituto Lidera Jovem para trazer isso para nós. Parabéns. E parabéns aos bilíngues aí, tá? Tá bom. Excelente noite para vocês e bom dia para Anderson. Tchau.